So, hello everyone. Welcome to our fourth discussion, I guess. So, previously we were talking about, or we were discussing about the self within a society. So, it basically talks about the sociological and the anthropological perspectives of the self. Now, we will be talking about the cognitive aspect of the conceptualizations of the self. So, particularly, what the psychological perspective of the self. So we will be looking into more about psychological theories. But mind you, class, the psychological theories, we studied it for about semester. It's a huge topic. So I will just be getting the more famous and um, easier to understand theories of, psychological theories of the self. So particularly, we'll be talking about Freud. We'll be talking about Eric Erikson and Carl Rogers and other theories in psychology. Okay, so I hope you're excited. And so let's begin. So today, again, our content would be talking about what's psychology. How does psychology differ with sociology? Okay, so we will be discussing about that, and then we'll be talking about the self by Freud and Erikson. These are actually very interesting psychodynamic concepts about the self, and of course, self by Carl Rogers and other theories. Okay, so what's psychology? Okay, what's psychology, class? Um, Some of you probably know what psychology is already. It's very famous in pop culture. Kana bitawng madunggan natong psychology says, nga bisag unsa na ipangbutang, yung mutuusad ta kay na may psychology says, no? But be careful about that class ha, kay most of the time kana magbutang-butang psychology says, dili jud psychology ang gaingon ana. Okay? So, psychology class is more than just what you're consuming online, no? It's what you call pop psychology. It's not really very academic. Um, Psychology is scientific. It's very rigorous in its methodologies, especially if you conduct research about the human mind, no, or human behavior. So it's very scientific. It's a scientific study of the mental processes and human behavior. Okay, that's basically if you're a psychology student, mo ni siya permi ipagbalik-balik na mo. What is psychology? It's the scientific study of mental processes and human behavior. So, as you may have observed, psychology is focusing on the cognitive aspect. Okay, so the mental processes and how our processes in the mind actually affect how we conduct it in our behaviors. Okay, so basically that's it. So, Miss, what's the difference, man? If you compare it to sociology, I'm quite confused. No, um that's all right. No, the difference between the two is that sociology is more looking into how society shapes the individual. So looking into more systemic processes, culture, okay, social norms. Um, so how do these influence the individual? But psychology class, our mind itself, how does our mind itself influence the way we function, okay, in our environment. So our mind mismo unsaon, whereas sociology, no, more on societal siya na aspect, very very kumbaga social siya. Okay, so our interaction with our environment, our interaction with our family, no, as you recall, no, the self within the society, self within the family, self within our own genders. Okay, so basically that's it. Though the difference is that ang psychology is very interested in the mental processes and they tend to look inward. Okay, so example na atong looking into our emotions, our attitudes. Um, but sociology is tends to look outward. It tends to look more into the roles and relationships nato. But class, it does not mean to say na ang psychology gi-discount na niya ang mga contextual effects sa person. Their psychology will always consider that one. Kay dili siya sociology versus psychology, dili siya inward versus outward. Because okay, psychology also recognizes that our outside influences really affects our the way we interact with our environment. Kay mo nang naatay social psychology. But anyways, this is just very simple lang, no? I just want to make it very simple na sociology gali class, always na siya outward. Okay, tends to look outward. So the roles, your relationships. But psychology is inward siya. So mental processes, our emotions, okay? Our development as a child going to adolescence to adulthood. Okay. Okay, so we're now done talking about the the difference between psychology and sociology. Now let's move on to Freud. Okay, I'm sure you've heard of Freud, Sigmund Freud. Sa mga wala pang kailan ni Freud, Sigmund Freud is actually very influential in terms sa larangan sa psychology, no. Um, how is he very influential, miss? During the time where nobody wants to talk about sex, he talked about sex, and he actually is very vocal with it, in terms of including sex into his theories. So grabe kaayo siya kanang he really, for him ba, personality is very closely linked to the sexual development sa usa ka bata or sa usa ka tao. Okay? In fact, he developed no the psychosexual stages, which we will be talking about later. And he also theorized the structures of personality. Now you will come into magkamit na pud mo ani nila no sa id, ego, and superego. Okay? So again, no iyang theory is very sexual siya at the time where talking about sex is very taboo no during sa iyahang era, okay, but now it's no longer that very taboo man. But anyway, he was very influential. But mind you class, kaning theory ni Freud dili na gid ni siya actually accepted sa scientific community. It's already kana bitang gitanggal na, but he is still talked about because his contributions um, to the field in itself, to the field of psychology, is recognized. Because if it weren't for this theory, there will not be other theories. There will not wait sa class. Walay laing theories na mo emerge stemming from his theory. Okay, so man gitawag na neo-psychoanalytic theories. So mga theories na ni try og counter ni Freud, no, and actually performing empirical studies, have empirical evidences as compared to Freud na dili siya empirical kayo. So dili kay siya kumbaga wa siya ebidensya kaayo ba. Puro ra siya case studies. So di ka case studies class dili man na generalizable sa entire population. So murag igana ba. But again, no, he is still talked about because a lot of his theories, I mean, a lot of theories were born out from trying to prove that he's wrong. Okay, and these theories are actually already have like are much more reliable, no, are much more tested. So, yeah. So when we discuss this one, take it as kuan like take it with a grain of salt. Kumbaga, kanang ayaw apply dayon diretso sa like mo anak ka na. Oo, mo tiging ni Miss kay si Freud ni theorize niya magbasa-basa na day kataw according to Freud's theory. No, please don't do that. So again, no, we're still talking about him so as to understand kasi magigasugod, no, so as to understand the later theories na ni-emerge stemming from his theory. Okay, so what's the structures of personality? According to Freud class, naatay tulo ka structures sa personality nato. Okay? Naatay id, okay, which is the pleasure principle. We have ego, which operates in the reality principle, and of course, we have the superego, which operates in immorality principle. Okay, so what are these three? Okay, let me pause the video kay naghang. Okay, so going back, no? Id operates in pleasure principle. Kaning the way id operates class. Concerned rin siya in satisfying what he likes at the moment, regardless of the social limitations. Kaya wala siya, dili na siya ka put, kanang wala na siya pakisa two contradicting concepts. Basta kay mo niya kung ganahan, right here, right now, it's what I need. So, more gina immediate gratification na, without concern for social or moral limitations. Now, if I ask you, what personality or what developmental stage usually very obvious ni siya, what would it be? Okay, I'll give you maybe mga 5 seconds to think of it. So, asa man na stage na makaingon ka na, mo ni siya nagpakita na wala pa ko'y regard, or wala pa ko'y knowledge, and I don't even care about the social implications of my actions. I just like to do it right here, right now. Kung gigutom ko, mukaon ko, no matter what. So, maingana. So, unsa man ni siya na stage? Okay, if your answer are babies, you are right. Okay, very good. Babies class, wala na sila paki. Kung gutomon na sila, muhilak na sila bisag ng misa. Kung bisag natulog si mamang papa sa alas 3 sa kadlaw, wag na sila paki class. No, babies actually are very quite a good example of the id principle. The id, no, or okay. So mo to siya class, no, going back. Again, ang id is talking about or operating in the pleasure principle. So what I want right now, I want it. Whatever is the consequence, I don't care. So the way it operates ba. Now let's move on to the superego, or sahay. It's more so represented in an angel, devil, no, pero that's not really how it is. Pero murag visualization lang siya ba. Nganong murag represent siya as murag angel, because it operates via morality principle. So diri ta makaibaw sa ato ang diri mo gawas musulod kumbaga ang values na gitudlo sa society nato. Okay? So unsa may social values, what are we taught of when we were young that's right and that's wrong? Okay? So mga virtues. Okay? So mao na siya ang morality principle or the superego. Now class, the id has actually two components. Okay? We have the conscience and the ego ideal. Class, ang conscious class, it's actually the values that we're told that's morally wrong. Okay? Ang ego ideal, mo ni siyang values na, okay, this is what you should do. So, asa man ta makakita example sa ana. Okay, think class, asa sa atong religion makakita tag example ana, na ingnan tag dili ni mao dapat buhaton. Okay? So, if you thought of the 10 commandments, di ba? Do not commit adultery, do not kill, di ba? All of those are actually part of the conscience, okay? The two component of the superego. Now, the ego ideal, of course, it's always be honest, no, be patient, sa pana din ha, no, mga virtues na kitudlo nato that we should do, no, within our society. So, class, if ang over ra kaayo ka, like ang nag-lead ba, like ang imagine tulo ka circle class ha, tulo ka circle. Kung dako kayo ni ang superego, gamay kayang ego, gamay king id, tendency ana is overly perfectionist ang tao, which is unhealthy. Okay? If lahi pod, if dako kaayo ang id, gamay ang ego, gamay ang superego, meaning ana selfish ka, without regard ka sa society. So, probably mag-commit ka crimes, sa pana din just to get what you want. Okay, so the ideal is that ego would be bigger than the two. Because ang ego actually operates in reality principle. Okay? Iyang i-balance ang demand sa id. Unsa may ganahan sa id? Iyang kwaon ng ganahan sa id, iyang tanawon if mo ego siya sa reality. Pwede ba siya makuha within the context of reality? Ang kaning id class, wala na siya paki kung tinuod na or like wa siya paki unsay social situation niya, kung possible ba siya or di. Ang iya ra jud ang iyang ganahan. Now ang reality principle, I mean ang ego, iyan ang kwaon, no, ang desire, okay, the desire of the id, the demands of the id, put it into the context within the reality, okay, and try to integrate it to the superego. Iya i-balance, no, mura siya, kung nagsakay mo kabayo, mura siya yung nag-control sa kabayo, okay. So paninita ata ta example, okay, naamoy upcoming naman midterms, right? So upcoming ng midterms, and then ganahan kaayo mo magduwa, okay, ganahan kayo mo magduwa og Mobile Legend, and then um you need to study pa, know your other subjects. So what's the id there? Okay, what is your your desire there? You want to play, okay? But what this the superego tells you, okay, that studying is important, because that's highly valued within society. Your parents would value you studying and getting good grades in order to land a better job. Okay, that's your superego operating. Now, how does ego balance the demands of the id here, which is playing, no, and the demands of the superego? So probably magkuan kano mag-set kag mga mechanics in order to satisfy both. What if you say, okay, what if I will play 1 hour after I finish one subject as means of reward? Okay, so that's how you operate. Okay, murag iyan ang i-balance and integrate it into reality. Okay, I hope it's clear, ha. It's not necessarily na bad ang id, na kay I put devil there, no, just for the visualization ba na kanang id gali wala na siya paki, basta kung iyang ganahan karon iyan ang gusto makuha ron. Ang iya ra gyud class is if I feel hungry, if I wanna have sex, if I wanna sleep, kanang mga desires bitaw, basic desires. If I want it, I want it now. I don't care if asa ko sa society, asa ko na place. I don't care what my role is. It's just plainly desire. Okay? Mura gina ang id. Ang superego, again, mga values na siya, what you should do, what you should not do. And then the ego, of course, the decision maker, and the balancer sa duha. Okay? So that's daw, according to Freud, the structures of personality. And according to the theory, sad, na again, it's better if dako ang or much more magkuan ang ego kaysa sa id o sa superego. Okay? Medyo na nadugay-dugayan ta diri, no. Now this is the psychosexual development, no. Let me transfer this. Okay. So class, there's a way to memorize this one. Only angel prays and loves God. Only angels pray and love God. So, oral stage, the anal stage, the phallic stage, the latent stage, and the genital stage. Okay, so let's go first to oral stage. What is oral stage, class? Okay, around when a child is born, no, from birth to 1 year old, so actually in different textbooks mas change na siya, no, but sa gibasihan na textbook nato, from birth to 1 year old class, the primary means for a baby to explore the world is through their mouth. Okay, ani this is how the child actually explores the world. So manotice na ninyo sa inyong mga igsuon, no, sa mga nay-anak dinhi, you will notice it with your kids na sige na sila tamsa, kung unsay kwaon ay kung unsay na makita nila ibutang yun na nila sa ilang baba. So that's how they explore the world. Now, if a child is not properly, like her or his needs are not properly met within the oral stage, what do I mean na needs niya? Of course, eating, okay? Kay oral stage man. So, if dili siya ma-meet properly, the child later on will develop an oral fixation. How does this translates into an adult personality? What is an oral fixation into adulthood? So could be class na siya mga disorders, no, that is tawagan ni class kanang obsessive compulsion to bite the nails, no, finger biting, smoking, overeating, sa pana din ha. So anything that has to do with um the mouth na dili siya sa taga ni class, dili siya healthy ba. So a child develops an oral fixation if dili ma-develop ang or dili mahatag sa proper needs niya ani na stage. Now let's move on to the anal stage. Okay, the anal stage class is ang focus now niya is already sa controlling sa bladder. So dili na siya na stage actually mag toilet train na. So good. So that's 1 to 3 years old. So a child that has a very strict toilet training, according to Freud, would develop an anal retentive na personality. Whereas a child na dili kay siya strict og toilet training, magdevelop na siya anal explosive na personality. So, unsa ng anal retentive and anal explosive? What does this personality translate into? So, if again strict og toilet training, anal retentive siya. So, possibly na very very orderly, neat freak, kana bitang sobraan rasad kaayo ka controlling ang personality sa tao kay because of the improper toilet training na overly rasad ka strict, okay? Ang anal explosive ko pasagdaan lang gyud ng mga bata din ha na maglibang bisag asa ikdakuan na niya mo translate daw na into adulthood na medyo messy kay siya groom kata dili siya organized so igana daw siya. Okay, so I hope na medyo nasabtan na siya, no? So the phallic stage class, primary focus niya is on the genitals. So dili actually mo develop ang Oedipus and Electra complex. So again class, take this theory very carefully ha kay at this juncture, at this part, ang Oedipus complex is actually one of the very controversial theory of Freud and even until now wala pa na siya na prove gyud na sakto. Okay, there are a lot of psychoanalysts, okay, that would really believe that this is true. We have evidence, we have case studies that will really show na it's true. Okay, and a lot of people pod na does not really believe in this theory would disregard it's not true. Okay, we don't have an empirical evidence with this. Oedipus complex class is when a male, no, a bata na laki would reach within this stage, they actually develop a romantic sexual attraction towards the parent. Can you imagine, class? Which is why it's very controversial. So, a romantic sexual attraction towards their opposite sex parent. So, if ako laki ko na bata, around this stage, I would develop a romantic sexual attraction towards my mother. Wala siyang Oedipus complex. Ang Electra complex bali, if ako bata ko na babae, towards this stage, I would develop a romantic sexual attraction to my father. So, bali siya, class. So, as you can see, very controversial mo. First reaction sa your class is, sure ka, miss? Oh, actually, this is actually part of the theory given ni Freud na very controversial. So, because this is very, kumbaga, too much no, for the kid to handle, because of the societal values pod. The kid would try to adapt the characteristic of their same-sex na parent. Okay? Thinking na if I become like my dad, my mom would like me. Kanon. Kaysa iyang i-adapt, iya siyang kumbaga, i-absorb ng mga characteristics sa iyang papa. The same po sa bata na babae, absorb ang characteristics sa iyang mama. So, mana siya, class. So, in this means of adopting the values of the parent, the same-sex parent, no, the child in here, this is actually indicative of the development of the superego. So, diri na sa phallic stage, nag-develop ang superego. Okay. So, now let's move on to the latent stage. Okay. Okay, latent stage. Saan ang latent stage? Okay, class, the latent stage, the superego continues to develop. Diba, pag phallic stage, naghinahina na siya develop. There is a latent stage, nag-continue na siya develop. Pero, ang its energy ani are suppressed. Mono na siya ang school age sa bata. So, rather than being very, focusing on sex or romantic, whatever, kanang mag-focus na siya sa having friends, no, the play stage, focusing energy on being industrious, nga na. Okay, and then the genital stage class, the libido becomes active again. But if properly ra pagka-develop ang development sexual development sa bata, they will have a um, healthy attraction towards the opposite sex. Okay, so the libido becomes active, and then during this stage, people develop a strong interest in the opposite sex. So I have here a video class if you want to know more about the psychosexual development of Freud. You can watch this one. So it's basically just reiterating what discussed a while ago. But if you want more information, this video is helpful. For now, let's move on to the defense mechanisms. So this is actually one of the theories ni Freud, no, na nagpabilin pa until now, and actually is developed by other or used, no, by other psychologists and therapists. Okay, so we have, I mean, there's a lot of defense mechanisms, but I chose to just present this. Okay, we have repression, suppression, regression, reaction, formation, projection, rationalization, displacement, and sublimation. Repression class is unconsciously removing an idea or feeling from consciousness, while ang suppression consciously removing an idea or feeling from consciousness. So meaning ra gyud ani class, repression imo siyang remove pero wala ka kaybaw na imo siyang na-remove. Okay, di ka aware. But suppression, aware ka. Aware ka na, di-remove nimo siya. So for example, dire, a man who survived six months in a concentration camp cannot recall anything about his life during that time period. Okay, so iyang na-repress ang nahitabo niya during that time sa concentration camp because it was too much for him to handle. Okay, it's too much for his kanang psyche to handle but for himself to handle. Another example would be if kanang there was a news class na naay bata na nakidnap, no. Within the 2 months, wag siya ka-remember unsa nahitabo niya. She even didn't remember the face of yung mga kidnappers. So that not remembering is actually repression unconsciously, because kanang kisa may tuyuon nakalimtan ang kuan nang sila kidnapper, no. So wala siya unconsciously na niya wala hinumduman para maka-operate pa siya tarong sa society. Okay, so it's because of trauma. Now, suppression is consciously removing an idea or feeling from consciousness. Example ani is terminally ill cancer patient puts aside his anxiety to enjoy a family gathering. Another example is if naa kay upcoming exam niya, nag-birthday pa si Carlito, kay invite ka ni Carlito sa iyang birthday niya, ganahan pa man ka mag-enjoy. So imo lang sang isuppress na naa kay upcoming exam, no, na wala pa nimo natun-an. Okay? So mo na siya ang suppression. Regression class is returning to an earlier stage of development. Example ani is a husband speaks to his wife in baby talk when telling her bad news. Very, very particular and very common regression that you do is when you are in a fetal position when you are sick. Sa nang fetal position, ato pakita ha sa nang fetal position.